On the day I was diagnosed with stomach cancer, my beloved man was celebrating his secretary's birthday. That woman had been clinging to him for 7 years, and he had been fed up with her for 7 years as well. He had once scolded her for being shameless, even thinking of calling the police to keep her away from our lives. But now, I saw Simon kissing her hair and bending down to pick up her high heels. His usually aloof expression softened as he gently called out to her, "Baby." I curled up on a bench in the hospital corridor, staring blankly at the silent phone screen. Half an hour ago, I was diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. The doctor frowned solemnly. "Your condition is very serious. We need to determine a treatment plan as soon as possible. I suggest discussing it with your family first." I nodded, pondering how to break the news, before finally contacting Simon. Since we got married, he had been a model husband, taking care of me meticulously, and everyone in the company knew I was his prized possession. Even when I had a simple cold, he would be extremely worried. Now, facing such a huge blow, I was more worried about him than myself. After all, we had gone through so much to finally have the life we had now. But to my surprise, no matter how many times I called, he did not answer. It's 9 o'clock now, and he should have finished work by now. Just now, he texted me saying he had an important client meeting. During the toughest times of starting our business, would endure excruciating pain at banquets just to not disturb him while he was in meetings. But now, the pain from the biopsy was starting to throb, making my hands tremble. I really wanted to hear his voice right away. After taking a deep breath, I dialed his number again. "The number you have dialed is not available, please try again later." I still only heard an endless dial tone. Refusing to give up, I called again out of stubbornness. Just when I thought the call would be disconnected, he finally answered. Simon's usually clear voice sounded a bit hoarse. "What's wrong, honey?" My nose tingled, and I tightly gripped the cold diagnosis report. "I went to the hospital today. There's something I need to tell you." "Simon," before I could finish, I heard a sweet, delicate laugh from the other end, followed by the sound of fabric rustling. I heard my own dry and panicked voice coming from my throat. "Are you with her?" Simon's voice stiffened for a moment, then quickly regained composure. "We're discussing an important project, and the client is rushing us. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Since you're not feeling well, don't wait up for me, get some rest." The call was quickly disconnected by him. I opened my mouth, then silently pursed my lips, swallowing back the words I had prepared to say. In the past, I would have just listened to him, thinking it was just another mundane social event, but if I didn't mishear, that woman was clearly Fiona, the secretary Simon had fired 3 years ago. Fiona used to be the person Simon hated the most. In the first year the company went public, she applied to be Simon's assistant. The position didn't require exceptional qualifications, as long as you were professionally competent, but her quiet demeanor and seemingly honest appearance worked in her favor. When I found out that she had feelings for Simon, I wasn't very surprised. Simon was the heartthrob of the university, with a queue of girls chasing after him. After going through struggles to become a boss, his already well-defined features became more rugged, exuding the unique aura of a mature man. As the captain of the modeling team, I only agreed to be with him after his persistent pursuit. Even at the company, I often received envious looks. In contrast, Fiona, with her ordinary looks, frail figure, sallow skin, and a timid manner of speaking, didn't make me feel threatened at all. However, her actions soon took a stark turn from her personality. She would bring homemade meals to Simon while he was busy reviewing contracts, indifferent to his cold glares. When that didn't work, she shortened her skirts, deliberately increasing physical contact during work. The most egregious time was when they were on a business trip together, and she stole his room key, claiming to be drunk as she entered his room. Blushing, she said, "You've been married to Wendy for so long without children. Whatever she can do, I can do it too. Do you see how good I am?" Simon was taken aback. He sternly scolded her, "Have you no shame? If you try this again, I'll fire you." The incident wore me down during the period of building the company, making it difficult for me to conceive again, a topic that remained a sore point between him and me, one that even his parents didn't dare bring up lightly to make her give up pursuing him. When they returned from the business trip, he specifically placed photos of us from our university days to our marriage on his desk, causing everyone in the company to comment on it. Colleagues joked that Fiona had no chance, always dreaming impractical dreams. Perhaps still possessing a hint of shame, Fiona did behave herself for a while. Just when I thought she would realize and voluntarily give up to keep her job, another incident occurred on a stormy night. During a busy business expansion period, just when we finally had time for intimacy, we were interrupted by a phone call. As soon as he answered, Fiona's intermittent crying was heard from the other end. "Simon, I am at the hotel now. Can you come pick me up? Are you crazy calling me in the middle of the night? Why don't you take a taxi?" Simon sighed irritably, about to hang up the phone. "No. Don't come. Help me, please." Her sudden desperate screaming startled both of us. The sound of thunder and rain outside amplified the desperation in her voice. Looking at me reassuringly, he massaged his temple. "What's going on?" Fiona was breathing heavily. "I came to deliver documents to Mr. Lee, but he brought people to block me downstairs. Now I'm hiding in the bathroom. I daren't come out. Please, I'm so scared." Upon hearing this name, both he and I held our breath. The Mr. Lee she mentioned was a key partner of the company, and if he had set his sights on Fiona, things wouldn't be easy for her today. Simon clenched his phone, stood up abruptly, and started getting dressed. As a girl, if something happened to her, the company would bear responsibility. I decided to check on her. When the light of day finally broke, Simon returned. I looked at him. His tired face and the small abrasion at the corner of his mouth made me feel sorry for him. He slumped onto the couch and complained to me, "You have no idea how difficult she is to handle." She cried loudly and ugly, insisting that I drop her off at her home. I was at my wit's end, dropped her off at the entrance of her residence and hurried back. Don't you have any sympathy for me? Just dropping her off at her community, I thought. But I could clearly see a blurry and suggestive lip print on his wet collar. The lip print was so conspicuous, I couldn't ignore it. Simon noticed my disappointment. He tried to reassure me, "Honey, I swear nothing happened between her and me last night. You are the only one in my heart." She suddenly leaned in while we were in the car. As I watched him scrub the collar of his shirt with his well-defined knuckles in the bathroom, my doubts slowly dissipated. With the phone the next day, Simon volunteered to dismiss Fiona. During a busy period of expanding the business, changing secretaries would only add more burden to his work. While I was concerned, Simon was firm in his decision. He called her into the office and announced the news in front of everyone. The reason was evident to all, and the room filled with whispers. Fiona's eyes welled up with tears. She suddenly lifted her pale face and stared directly at him. "Simon, are you really this heartless? I grew up in an orphanage, barely finished college with scholarship money, and if you fire me, I'll be out on the streets. And if it wasn't for the incident delivering files, I wouldn't have called you last night." She choked, grabbing his sleeve tightly. "Why only offer to take me home at night, not during the day?" Simon shook her hand off, his face cold. "Do you realize how much you have interfered in my life with Wendy?" "But," she pouted, her eyes misting over, "from the moment I saw you, I knew I was meant for you. Do you have no shame? I'm married, I don't like you at all. How many times do I have to say it?" He rubbed his forehead, his face turning grim, a sign of anger. Seeing her unresponsive, Simon took out his phone. "If you don't understand, I'll call the police right now." Fiona stepped back, a hint of determination flashing across her pitiful face. "Fine, I'll leave. Don't regret it," she said, pushing through the crowd and rushing out. Finally, she's gone. Nobody will bother us again. Simon sighed in relief, about to come over and hold my hand. But as he took a step forward, someone rushed in a panic. "It's bad, something happened to Fiona." Fiona had been hit by a car downstairs at the company. She lay on the ground, her white skirt stained with mud from the tires, her legs cut leaving fresh blood. Some colleagues stopped the driver, while others called for first aid. When the paramedics arrived, Fiona was still calling Simon's name. His body stiffened, then he turned and got into the ambulance. The nurse, unaware of our relationship, comforted her softly. "Don't be afraid, your boyfriend is right here with you." I was about to speak, but I saw her grasp Simon's pinky finger tightly with blood-stained hands. I stared at her hand and managed to say, "Simon." No noise during resuscitation. The nurse interrupted me, reminding him, "The patient is in critical condition. You need to help stabilize her emotions." Fiona's fingers traced over his palm, her whole body trembling. He looked at me with a complex expression, but didn't pull his hand away. In that moment, I glimpsed a flash of something tender in his eyes. Her injuries weren't severe, near shock that day, due to hyperventilation from panic. She'd be discharged in less than a week. But Simon wanted to visit her. I didn't understand. She had resigned and was no longer our employee. As a capable adult with caretakers, there was no reason to visit her. He explained that since the accident happened right below our office, it would be troublesome if people speculated about how we treated our employees, affecting our reputation. His clear-eyed gaze and consideration for the company left me speechless. Yet, I felt something was changing. Surprisingly, after that, Fiona never came to bother Simon again, and he never mentioned her name. Her popularity had not been great in the company, so no one really cared about her life post-resignation. I thought Simon and I had tacitly agreed that she was just a forgettable episode. If not for hearing that familiar voice from his phone again today, I would have almost forgotten about her. How could someone who was fired 3 years ago suddenly be back in contact with him? I didn't want to assume the worst. But reason kept reminding me that with Fiona's capabilities, she had no reason to have any contact with a rising businessman like Simon. Feeling numb, I finally stood up and left the hallway that I'd been sitting in for so long. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast a cold glow from above, as if pouring an invisible bucket of water over me. At home, Simon still hadn't returned. Wanting to discuss treatment plans with him, I decided to contact the doctor the next day. The abnormality on the phone made me uneasy. Just as I was about to take sleeping pills and go to bed, a new message popped up on my phone. After reading the content inside, I felt like I had been struck by lightning. Fiona had just posted a status. In the photo, a torn black lace nightgown and a crumpled men's tie were tangled messily together. Despite there being only this one picture, it was enough to make it clear what had happened. She coyly captioned it, "The best birthday gift." That tie was the one I had personally tied for Simon this morning before he left, and it was also a gift I had specially customized for him on the last Valentine's Day. The familiar pattern and the delicate embroidery on the back vividly reminded me that this definitely wasn't just a coincidence of the same style. My breath caught, and my vision blurred uncontrollably. All the effort I had just made to convince myself to trust Simon faded pale and ridiculous in this instant. My stomach started to cramp intermittently. I turned over, clutching my abdomen, staring blankly at the ceiling. Simon had been mingling in the mall for many years, and there were always women with hidden intentions approaching him. But no matter how they flirted, they were all coldly rejected by him without exception. He always showed the ring on his ring finger, smiled courteously and gently bowed his head. "Sorry, not only am I married, but I also particularly mind third parties getting involved." Even my girlfriend said that if zombies were to attack and there was only one pure love war god left on Earth, it could only be Simon. But now, all those words felt incredibly ironic to me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and felt the tears falling uncontrollably. Simon had seen all kinds of beautiful women. Why did it have to be Fiona? Simon returned the next day at noon. He brought exquisite Japanese food and called me to get up with a smile. "Wendy, still sleeping in? I brought the few places you love to eat at the most, some of which took a long time to line up for." I just glanced indifferently at the bag in his hand. He didn't know that my health conditions did not allow me to eat those things anymore. Perhaps thinking of something, a hint of guilt appeared in Simon's eyes. "Sorry, the client yesterday was a bit difficult. I didn't mean to stay out all night. By the way, what did you want to tell me yesterday?" I slowly shook my head, glossing over what I originally wanted to say, reaching out to touch his brows and eyes lightly. His angular features remained handsome, and as he gazed at me like this, it felt like we were back in college again. I sighed almost imperceptibly in my heart. This person was the same as before, but at the same time completely different. After a long time, I saw a faint smile of myself in his eyes. "It's nothing, just a trivial matter not worth mentioning." "Well, you scared me when you called out of the blue like that." He leaned in to bite my lip, as if seeking some comfort. As his shirt gradually came undone, I saw a faint mark on his neck. In the past, I should have pushed him away and demanded an explanation, but I didn't. I was afraid that if I pushed further, the warmth of the moment would become broken beyond repair. When Simon pressed closer, I accepted his actions obediently, but my eyes glanced past his broad shoulders to the box in the corner hiding the medication. The doctor said, if I didn't receive chemotherapy, I would have at most 3 more months to live. But seeing him like this just now, I had a crazy thought. Would Simon regret treating me deceitfully and lying to me like this if I died? For the entire next week, Simon came home right on time from work. I could guess the reason why he did so. In 2 more days, it would be our wedding anniversary. Feeling guilty, he naturally wanted to make it up to me at this important moment. But what Simon didn't know was that while he thought he could hide these things from me, I had discreetly investigated him and Fiona thoroughly. Even if they exited the stage sorrowfully, I had to find out exactly when they started this absurd entanglement. The company they worked for was a relative of my best friend, and the work was done efficiently. They sent the report to me quickly after accepting the commission. Looking at the hundreds of pages in the file, I found every word absurd and heart-wrenching. So, Fiona, after the incident, used the excuse of Simon leaving behind a watch to ask him to come to the hospital to get it. That watch was a gift I gave him at graduation. The Swiss-made watch had an unmatched precision buckle, so how could it possibly end up with her without being manually removed? I asked my best friend, under what circumstances would a man take off his watch without staying overnight? Her answer made me even more silent. No wonder he never dared to tell me the real purpose of visiting her. Thinking back now, everything was already apparent. I mused gloomily that even his dramatic dismissal of her was probably just a superficial act for my benefit. After all, he had changed secretaries, but not in the bedroom. From the number of times Fiona was blocked, Simon did regret it. As for why the defense collapsed, maybe it was out of sympathy, maybe she was too troublesome, or maybe he just wanted to. After quitting, due to her strong utilitarian nature, she had not found a suitable job and could only make a living by delivering takeout. She showed him her burned hand from the takeout, sent him screenshots of customers insulting her, saying she couldn't stand this kind of life anymore, and it would be better to just die. He first impatiently blocked and deleted her, but gradually just left her messages on read. On the day her performance hit a low, she sent him a voice message crying, "Simon, I really want to see you. If you don't come again, I will jump off the rooftop." He told her to stop pretending, but panicked when he saw the video she sent him, shouting at her to stay put and not move. As the page paused here, I took a sharp breath. I remembered that day when Simon came home from work. His shirt uncommonly smelled of strong women's perfume. He had always been averse to this smell, deliberately keeping his distance from female guests even during social gatherings, and if there was a scent, it would only stick to his coat. And he, who had always been energetic, also rarely changed into pajamas directly after coming out of the bathroom, choosing to rest. I found it strange, but seeing the faint dark circles under his eyes, I didn't ask much, brushing it off as him being too busy with work. The message records show that Fiona messaged him the next day, "See, I won the bet. I knew you had me in your heart." Simon replied with just a period. I know his personality better than anyone. That was his tacit approval, and also indulgence. Just when I thought Fiona was insignificant, she had already turned into a clinging vine, slowly creeping from his limbs to his heart. Maybe I overestimated him. I held back the churning in my stomach and continued scrolling with the mouse. The further I scrolled down, the more ambiguous their conversations became lately. It had gone far beyond normal flirting. I raised my hand to touch my cheek, realizing it had turned cold without me noticing. My friend messaged me, cursing Simon as a scumbag who deserved no good, while also comforting me not to be sad for someone like him. But I knew, I wasn't crying because of him. I was grieving for myself. "Wendy, please don't fall in love with the wrong person in the next life." On the morning of our anniversary, Simon woke up earlier than me. I was tightly held by him in my sleep, almost struggling to breathe. Wendy, I just had a dream, I dreamt of you. His eyes were red, burying his head in my neck, unwilling to continue. I patted his shoulder, feeling no ounce of moved as before, just finding it all absurd. It's just a dream, and you are already scared to this extent. What would your reaction be when that day actually comes? After whispering sweet nothings for a while, he finally agreed to get up and wash up. The phone on the bedside table buzzed, and when I checked the screen, I put it back without any expression. Simon had been accompanying me all the time recently, and I guessed Fiona would make a move soon. I didn't expect her to lose her patience so quickly. She said, "Just one call from me, and he will come to me tonight." Do you believe it? I guessed she just wanted to see me hysterically arguing with Simon. But I refused to fulfill her wish. She thought by constantly possessing him and satisfying him, she would have the last laugh. But the living can't compete with the dead. Simon had booked a French restaurant and specifically requested the best chef to serve us. The piano music softly played, and I recognized it as my favorite, for Elise. Since we launched the company, be it emotionally or materially, he had always treated me impeccably. If I hadn't seen those facts with my own eyes, would have been soft and believed he was the most perfect partner in the world. The light shadow on his head made Simon look even more handsome, as he poured a glass of whiskey for me, his eyes shimmering. He didn't know my health had been declining every day lately, and drinking that liquid felt like slashing my internal organs with a blade. I still accepted it and gulped it down before he could say anything. "Simon, are you keeping something from me?" The bitter taste spread in my mouth, and his response was a brief silence. "Why would I? What nonsense are you thinking?" His throat swirled, looking into my eyes openly, but his hand holding the glass trembled imperceptibly. At that moment, I understood vividly that despite the physical proximity between us, his heart had already changed. The abrupt ringtone interrupted our silence. He glanced at the screen for a split second, but his face turned pale instantly. Although Simon quickly grabbed the phone, I saw his nickname in that moment. He called her, "Baby," probably some ignorant supplier again. He put away his phone, tried to come over and hug me. The vibrating sound urged, as if urging something intangible. I calmly watched his every move, and he appeared extremely anxious compared to me. Glancing at the screen, Simon stood up unnaturally, even took out the car keys. "Something seems to have gone wrong with the project, sorry, I need to deal with it." Before leaving, he handed me a gift he had prepared long ago. "Happy anniversary, I love you." After he left, I opened the gift box and sent the picture of the necklace to a friend who knew about it. It was a limited edition that needed to be ordered at least 3 months in advance at the counter, and customers in each city would be strictly limited in the quantity they could purchase. My friend quickly replied that there were 2 order records under Simon's name for it, and she had even specially asked her to write the note. Looking at the provided notes, I didn't say a word anymore. They were 2 remarkably similar messages. To my true love. For my only love. At that moment, my eyes stung badly. So, Simon would make such loving promises to another person while lavishing me with such care. I hated him. After that night, Simon returned to his usual self. Perhaps he felt guilty or sensed something. His phone hadn't buzzed with calls from clients or suppliers for half a month. The more time he spent at home, the more agitated Fiona became. She threatened me confidently, "I will make sure you leave Simon this month." I moved my finger, calmly swiping that shocking message away. When Fiona realized her provocations couldn't shake me, she went crazy, sending me videos of her and him, and printing out transcriptions of their voice messages to me. I remained unmoved. When she realized provoking me couldn't evoke any emotional response, she took advantage of Simon's absence to pretend to be a delivery person and show up at my door. The moment I opened the door, I was stunned. "Who gave you the guts to come here?" She threw away the helmet, squinting at me with a strange kind of madness in her eyes. "Wendy, you're still as beautiful as before, no wonder Simon refuses to divorce, right?" She suddenly opened the bag, pouring all the soup in the box onto herself, then slapped herself loudly. Seeing her quickly reddening cheeks, I instinctively took a step back but was pulled by my collar to the staircase by her. She was a complete lunatic, and I had a premonition this drama wouldn't just involve her and me. "Fiona, calm down." She was incredibly strong, and I futilely twisted the hand that was gripping my collar with excessive force. "Guess who he will choose this time?" She smirked at me, getting closer, and then with a push of her hands, she fell backward harshly towards the stairs. In the next second, Simon's figure appeared in view. I was about to say something, but couldn't find my words when I met his icy gaze. He quickly glanced at me lying on the ground, then ran straight to Fiona. She looked pained, clutching her stomach, and kept moaning, "It hurts, Simon, our baby, will he be okay?" I couldn't believe it, raising my head in disbelief. Fiona was carrying his child? Tears brimming in her eyes, she trembled as she sobbed in his arms. "I was just here to drop off something for Wendy." I don't know why she spilled it on me, slapped me, pushed me down. I was so scared at that moment, I didn't even know what I said wrong. "Simon, save me, she must be trying to kill our baby." Simon held her tenderly, looking at me with a disappointed gaze. I covered the wound on my leg, chuckled self-deprecatingly. So, this was the reason he had been protecting her, hiding it from me. Never imagined he cared so much about this child. But when I was drinking the supplement, he whispered softly that he didn't even care if he would have a child himself. I gazed at him sorrowfully. "Simon, don't you have anything to say to me?" His voice was ice-cold when he spoke. "We'll talk about today's events later. I know you despise Fiona, and she really shouldn't have been here today. But she's pregnant now. What you did today really disappointed me. Wendy, I know you're angry right now, but these years, I believe I haven't wronged you in any way. But you can't bear children, and my career is on the rise. I can't be childless. If you calm down, you should understand my feelings." I didn't argue with his words. Since he chose to believe the rumors, why bother explaining further? Nothing is sadder than a dead heart. I staggered to my feet, smiling with a sense of relief. "There's nothing to calm down about, let's get a divorce." Simon hastily carried Fiona away. I closed the door in silence, ready to pack my bags. Suddenly, a dull pain pierced through me, followed by a strong sweet smell rushing to my throat. I rushed to the bathroom, coughed a couple of times instinctively, only to see the sink filled with a horrifying amount of blood. Suffocation overwhelmed me, cold sweat soaking my back almost instantly. I leaned against the wall gasping for air. It took a long time to recover. When I looked up again, the person in the mirror with disheveled hair, pale as snow, looked shockingly haggard. I was about to turn on the faucet to rinse when I noticed the cracked couple mug next to it, left with a gaping hole. This mug had been broken before, and Simon had it repaired. It was during the time we just moved into our new home, and Simon's mother, who had always had reservations about our marriage, learned about my health condition, barged in and demanded a divorce despite his protests that day. She said the most hurtful and vulgar things, threw and broke everything in the room. Simon, usually calm and composed, had tears in his eyes for the first time. He silently looked at the broken mug, shielding my trembling body behind him. I heard him speak slowly and firmly, "No matter if you accept Wendy as a daughter-in-law or not, she is the only wife of my life. Whether we have children or not, it doesn't matter to me. I can't even take care of her alone for a lifetime. Where would I find time for someone else?" After his mother left, Simon repaired the cup on the floor, shivering. He hugged me gently, reassuring softly, "Don't be afraid. I won't let anyone mistreat you again." That day, I truly believed him. But now, that broken mug was like our relationship. Once the cracks appear, no matter how much we try to mend it, it can never go back to the way it was. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and returned to the bedroom. Despite resisting memories, every item here carried Simon's presence, forcefully reminding me of everything that had happened between us. The old yellowed photograph on the nightstand showed us on our graduation day, him daring to kiss my cheek amidst cheers. His gaze was so intense, even the usually strict teacher blessed us with a smile for a lifetime of love. The first ring in the drawer, bought during our hardest times, a cheap plain band he saved up for. To choose this ring, he spent 3 hours at the mall, enduring countless scornful eyes and mockery. The roses on the windowsill, the designer dresses filling the closet, my eyes filled with tears unnoticed. Despite the overwhelming dizziness and spasms of pain, they continued to remind me of everything that happened between us. Here I packed my bags after half an hour. Not a single item related to Simon was taken with me. As I prepared to leave, I received a message from him, wanting to talk. The doctor said it's essential for late-stage patients to stay positive, but now, I feel all my despair and grievances stem from Simon. I smiled wryly, my unsteady body sliding down the wall. I didn't read through his lengthy apology and self-analysis, just replied with 4 words, waiting for you to return. Then decisively blocked and deleted him. Knowing Simon's nature, he must think as long as I am willing to communicate with him, there's still a chance to salvage everything. Unfortunately, the glaring red exclamation point would show how absurd his thoughts were. 5 minutes later, the phone rang as expected. Leaning against the cold wall, I rejected the call without hesitation. And dialed another number for help. I could feel my life slipping away bit by bit. Perhaps in a few days, a few hours, perhaps in a few seconds. But even in death, I refused to die here. Simon kept persistently calling me. I assume he might finally experience that desperate, lonely wait. However, it's just the beginning. I'm well aware that with Simon's nature, he will never leave Fiona now to come back to me. He was a successful entrepreneur, but he forgot that in all these years of venturing down this path, my strategies were not inferior to his. Simon understood market trends well, always going against the tide in times of crisis to reap huge profits. While I understood the value of patience, from gathering momentum to laying a trap, ensuring a successful strike. He pursued profit while I plotted with my heart, targeting his heart. I think he will like the gift I left him. The darkness in front of me gradually spread. I could hear sharp ambulance sirens downstairs and Anna's crying outside the door. I tried to move my mouth, but realized I couldn't make a sound. In a daze, I seemed to see Simon from our university days again. He smiled with his eyes, his figure handsome, walking towards me against the light. As per memory, I would shyly lower my head and stand in place nervously waiting for him to confess. But this time, I chose to turn around and quickly run towards another unknown light. Under the sky, the cry of an unknown white dove echoed. It is said that it is the sound of mourning a departed loved one, and also a blessing symbolizing a new beginning. Epilogue: Simon never thought Wendy would actually go through with the divorce. He thought she was just angry and would change her mind. On the way to the hospital with Fiona in his arms, Wendy messaged him, "I have packed up the house, we'll move out tomorrow." Regret flooded over him immediately. He wanted to call and explain, tell her he was just momentarily confused, begging her not to be mad, but Fiona's groans from the passenger seat reminded him that now wasn't the best time to communicate. Upon returning home from the hospital, he realized there was no trace of Wendy left in the house. She had left cleanly, not a single mark left behind, even taking the potted plant from the balcony. No, there were things she left behind as well. He stumbled into the bedroom, searching through drawers and cabinets, ending up sitting on the floor staring blankly. Every piece of jewelry he had given her, she had quietly placed back in their boxes. She was gentle, never one to say harsh words. Yet seeing those things, he felt it was more painful than being stabbed in the lungs. On the bedside table, he found a letter Wendy had left for him. He opened it expectantly, ready to agree to whatever she needed to come back. But as he read through the contents, Simon's breath caught in his throat. Besides lengthy evidence of his infidelity, there was a divorce agreement. Married for 7 years, they had never argued, not until this one time. But this time, Wendy was determined. How could she just give up on their years of love? Yet with the irrefutable evidence before him, the purpose of this agreement was merely to inform him. Simon rubbed his face, reaching for his phone to call Wendy. No matter how many times he tried, only the cold electronic voice replied that the call couldn't be connected at the moment. The endless waiting wore him out. He took off his suit jacket, slumping on the edge of the bed, unknowingly falling asleep while holding onto his phone. Simon dreamt of a 21-year-old Wendy. He had seen her at the school reunion party. Her fair skin, tall stature, and especially her focused eyes made his cheeks burn involuntarily. Before going on stage, she lifted her dress, carefully making her way through the crowd, her flowing hair brushing against his face and stirring up his heartbeat in order to win Wendy over. Even the popular Simon had to put in a lot of effort. The young man's emotions were intense and sincere, so shortly after graduation, he proposed to her. Once they left the halo of campus life, both he and Wendy came from ordinary families, striving to make a living in the big city from their small town. After working for a year, he expressed his desire to start his own business. She quit her job at a foreign company to work in his small studio, doing clerical work, accounting, serving, and handling everything she could. Neither of them had much experience in society, and they faced many setbacks in the early days. During their toughest times, they were deceived, living in a rented apartment where the windows wouldn't close properly. Despite the cold draft in winter, she refused to turn on the heater, saying they needed to save more money for his business. He felt sorry but couldn't do much, only being able to hug her tightly in bed to keep warm. In order to assist him in business socializing, Wendy, who was allergic to alcohol, could drink glass after glass until she had a gastric bleeding before stopping. Watching her lying in the hospital bed, he couldn't help but shed tears, silently vowing to work even harder to repay her sacrifices. By a stroke of luck, he secured a big contract, and the first thing he did was rush back to tell her. Wendy was even happier than him. The two of them cried together, laughing in their small office. In that moment, he felt like as long as she was by his side, they could overcome any difficulty in the future. On the day the company went public, he deliberately took her back home. Walking along the path through the fields, she wore a skirt, discomforted by the low-hanging, full ears of wheat scratching her calves. He tenderly reached out to shield her, making her blush. In this dream, the scene lingered warm and vivid, the emotion sincere. But suddenly, something happened, and the scene turned into dark clouds looming across the sky with thunder and lightning flashing. He saw Wendy, who had been smiling just a moment ago, suddenly coldly push away his hand and run forward swiftly. She said, "Simon, I don't want you." He tried to reach for her hand, but no matter how he chased, he couldn't catch up. He couldn't see her back clearly, and couldn't even tell where he was. He wandered in boundless darkness, calling her name while running aimlessly. It felt like an invisible hand was choking his throat, causing his chest to tremble and his breath to quicken. This sense of fear and panic left him powerless, drenched in sweat. Just when he thought he would die in this nightmare, a brittle voice suddenly woke him up. "Simon." As he opened his eyes, Simon thought Wendy had a change of heart and come back to find him. But what he saw was her best friend, Anna. He was surprised for a moment, looking at her. "How come it's you? Where's Wendy? I want to see her." Anna sneered and didn't answer his question. Instead, she coldly stared at him. "Now you remember her. But you're here instead of being with that pregnant bitch. Who are you trying to act sad for?" Standing calmly, he listened to her insults and then moved his lips. "I know she doesn't want to see me. Please, give me a chance to see her." Simon thought, he was wrong. Wendy loved him so much, if he could just see her, he could find a way for her to forgive him. As a successful businessman, he thought about what expression and words he should use to attract her attention when he saw her for the first time. After a while, he saw Anna's sad and mocking smile. "Where are you off to see her?" "Simon, I'll tell you, Wendy is dead." His face froze, as if he heard a strange joke. "Did she tell you to say that? I know she's upset, but wouldn't curse me like this." Unable to bear it, Anna slapped him hard, throwing a paper in front of him. Her face was weary, her eyes bloodshot. "I'll repeat it. Wendy is dead. You didn't even know your wife had cancer, did you?" Suddenly, a loud noise exploded in his ears, making him tremble and fall to the ground. The death certificate was light, but heavy. He struggled to pick it up several times, finally confirming the truth. He started coughing violently, eventually spitting out a pool of blood. Simon went to see Wendy one last time. She had no family, only a few friends came to visit. The funeral was very simple with white flowers and candles, piercing his eyes. He couldn't believe what he saw. In the hallway, he hysterically shouted, and everyone said he had gone mad. After being forcibly injected with a sedative by a nurse, he ran downstairs again and stumbled to her. Wendy couldn't be dead. Just a moment ago she was smiling sweetly like before. He knelt down, trying to grab her hand, but only felt coldness. It was a chilling cold that didn't allow him to deceive himself. As if a knife had cut open his heart, leaving a bloody wound. He remembered seeing in the report that Wendy had passed away the day after taking Fiona to the hospital. The doctor said her body was already weak, and the shock that day led to a fatal seizure. Despite their efforts, because of the weak will to live, she didn't make it. Seeing him still standing in place, the doctor pushed his glasses and asked, "Are you her family?" The day of diagnosis, she had been trying to call her family, but couldn't reach anyone, unaware of what was happening on the other end. She was so young, with hope at the beginning, but unfortunately, it's a pity. It was then that Simon finally realized the extent of his mistakes. He silently turned back home. He didn't care about business anymore, even when customers overwhelmed him with complaints. The company was founded by him and Wendy. Now that she was gone, what other motivation did he have to move forward? Night fell, lights shining bright. When Fiona came to visit, she found Simon distressed. He had lost weight, cheeks sunken, and looked terrible. During these days, he neither ate nor slept, constantly numbing himself with alcohol. His memories became increasingly blurry. He forgot everything from the past few years, only remembering Wendy saying she would go out to buy him something delicious. As long as he waited here, he believed she would come back. Fiona touched his face, carefully avoiding the broken glass bottles on the floor, calling him, "Simon." Simon lifted his head expressionless, his pupils trembling when he saw eyes similar to Wendy's. Upon seeing the person clearly, his face changed, then returned to a numb state. He tilted his head, counting down the minutes and seconds until Wendy would return. In reality, he had been counting repeatedly, lost in thoughts. Fiona grew impatient, clinging to his arm, shaking him forcefully. "Simon, Wendy is dead. You still have me and our baby." Before she could finish, Simon kicked her hard. "Get out. I don't know you." Fiona cried, asking, "After all this time, have you never loved me?" She kept repeating, "Why? Why can't you just look at me? I'm just a woman longing for love." Simon seemed oblivious to her pain. He sat like a puppet with no soul, still counting. Confused, Fiona watched his actions and felt that compared to herself, Simon was the one who had truly lost his mind. She always knew how to use tears to gain sympathy, but now, crying and weak, he didn't even look at her. Soon, her tears turned to fear. Unlike last time, this time she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen, unable to speak a word. She could only watch as the floor beneath her was stained in red, trying to get Simon's attention by breaking the glass bottles, but no matter how hard she tried, it seemed like he had lost his hearing. The room became silent, even scarier when the shadows threatened to swallow everything. Just when the room fell eerily silent, the loud shout of the street vendors outside ripped through the calm night. Simon's somber expression suddenly brightened. He thought, since Wendy refused to return, she must be mad at him. The night was silent, and she must be scared waiting alone. He had to find her. He struggled to get up, not even bothering to put on shoes, and ran barefoot downstairs. Every passerby heard him muttering, "She must be waiting for me at the stall." In the dark night, the dazzling neon lights enveloped the running man. Ignoring the speeding vehicles, he seemed to be looking for something. But on this wide road, there was nowhere to be seen a peddler's shadow. The road conditions were rough, Simon's feet were scratched badly by the sharp stones and gravel, but he didn't care about that. He only knew Wendy was still waiting for him. Not knowing how long he had been searching, the sound of a distant bus suddenly blared its horn. The blinding hazard lights almost made it impossible for people to keep their eyes open. When his vision became blurry, Simon suddenly stopped in his tracks. He opened his arms, revealing the first smile he had shown in the past few days. "Wendy, I'm here to apologize to you."